Both the prosecution and the defense are likely to rest tomorrow, which means we are almost at the end. Hi, I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and it's time for another Daily Diddy, bringing you daily trial updates from the P. Diddy trial until we get a verdict, which is going to be sooner rather than later. So, today the prosecution called back to the stand Homeland Security agent Cerciello, who was on the stand Friday. He is another one of what they call a summary witness, where he's basically going through all of the evidence and just sort of wrapping everything up in a bow for the jury. So he was on the stand talking about text messages, like the tons and tons of text messages that they went through as part of the investigation. And of course, what does it show? Christina Coram, chief of staff, being very active in terms of booking the flights for the sex workers for the freak-offs, as well as making sure Diddy had everything in his room. And by everything, this meant food, snacks, IV drip, tons and tons of lube, Astroglide, all that stuff. And again, making sure that any whim he had was basically being catered to. It was also interesting to note that he was haggling with his how should I say, I guess the sex worker service from the place where he basically was calling and booking the sex workers for these freak-offs, being like, hey, I'm a regular customer. Can't you cut me a break? I guess everybody wants to save money, even when doing a freak-off. Yeah, there's that. So again, just giving more nuance and context to a lot of the evidence that was discussed. Went through some more text messages involving Jane and her pushing back, not wanting to continue to do freak-offs, as well as, again, just looking at all of the correspondence back and forth between. Also, the jury saw two more freak-off tapes, basically involving Jane. Apparently, there were 50 explicit tapes that were found by Homeland Security when they did that raid of Diddy's house. And all of those videos were filmed between December 17th and December 21st. 50 videos in like a 4-day period. Yeah. So anyway, complete madness. So what's next is that the prosecution is going to finish with the Homeland Security agent tomorrow. He was cross-examined today by the defense. Basically, they tried to enter some more videos that they basically are going to argue show that all of these freak-offs were done consensually, that no one was being trafficked, that sort of thing. And they were using text messages to that effect as well, where things seemed amicable. So once the prosecution finishes with that witness, then they're going to rest their case, which means now it's over to the defense. Well, the defense indicated today that they are not calling any witnesses, which means Diddy is not going to testify. Not surprised. He stands to lose way more if he opens his mouth than if he just stays quiet at the table, because if he gets on the stand, that means the prosecution can cross him hard on just about everything and completely destroy him. They're better off, the defense is better off just staying put, keeping their mouth shut, and arguing that the prosecution hasn't proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt. So instead of calling witnesses tomorrow, the defense is going to stipulate to a few things, which means they're going to agree to certain issues or certain topics that, okay, I'm not contesting this. So probably not going to contest the authenticity, of the beating tape, for instance. Once those stipulations are over, what's going to happen next is what's called a charge conference, which means that both the prosecutor and the defense are going to sit down, go through the indictment, all the charges that Diddy is facing, and maybe just kind of mixing it up a bit. So for instance, we can do something called lesser included offenses. So giving you an example here, not going to apply in this particular instance, but let's say you're charged with first-degree murder. Well, a lesser included offense of first-degree murder is second-degree murder. So that's a way if the jury's like, I don't think you really hit first-degree murder, but I think you proved second-degree, that's another way to get a guilty verdict, even though that's not exactly what was charged. Totally legit. It happens every day in the courtroom in the United States. So those are the types of issues that'll be discussed, as well as what specific instructions should be given to the jury so that they can go back and deliberate and know what the parameters are. So, lastly, we're probably going to see closing arguments on Thursday. Each side has 4 hours. Whew, 4 hours to give their closing arguments. I've never given a 4 hour closing argument. I can't even imagine. But hey, I mean, there's a lot to go through here. There's a lot to talk about. Personally, I don't think you should use all 4 hours because people are gonna lose focus, start falling asleep on you, and forget what you said in hour one, right? So you gotta be, even though you may have 4 hours, it may not make sense to use all of it. So again, there's a lot that each side has to go through, and they're like I've been saying, the prosecution is going to have to lip sync for their life to make sure that people on the jury understand what racketeering, what RICO is. So I'm going to give some tidbits of as to what I think should be highlighted in closing arguments over the course of the next few days. So thanks again for tuning in. See you tomorrow. Bye.